All right, superb. So, good morning or good afternoon, even. That's a good start. A warm and wonderful welcome to you, Melvina, today. And thank you so much for saying yes to joining me on Coffee with Kofi, which I failed at today because I forgot to make a coffee myself. So, um, I'm really excited to be able to talk to you and share some of your story, as I have been, leaders that have answered the call to pivot and do something with their amazing talents that is meaningful to themselves. So I'll turn over to you and just say, how are you first and foremost today? And then we can get into the conversation if that's all right.
Yeah, thank you. And I know we tried to make this happen, so I'm really glad that we are, and really glad to be here with you. And yes, I'm feeling really good. I think whenever the sun is out for me, it's like I feel at home.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
So yeah, I am feeling good.
I'm honestly the same. I think wherever you are when the sun is out, it almost transforms your mood with the sun. Everything looks brighter, like
Yeah.
Technicolor, it's just yeah, it's like that. So amazing. So for me, I think it would be really helpful for anyone that tunes into this to hear a bit about you. And I know that we go back, I think coming up for a decade now, when we worked together many moons ago in our corporate seats that we had. And it's fascinating and also serendipitous that we've both taken the call to pivot and do other things. So just to make others a bit more aware of your background, starting wherever you want, would you be able to give us, I guess, an espresso shot of who is Melvina Metochi, and then we can get into the call to pivot and move into a different direction.
Yeah, no, great. Yeah, no, it's funny because a lot of people have had trouble placing me in terms of, you know, I think people detect an accent, but it's not entirely clear where it's from. So I wasn't born in the UK, but
Mm.
I was born on the small island of Cyprus.
Mhm.
And I came to the UK when I was 17.
Mhm.
Um, so early years were very much, very family focused. There was a big family. And in many ways, it was a sort of a great childhood. Um, and for me, coming to the UK was a sort of opening up of my world, if you like.
Mhm.
So you always, because we were on a small island, and we're always looking to see where the future would lie. So I think coming to the UK was something that was sort of we were preparing for. A lot of the people that I knew
Mm.
as well were looking to probably go either in outside the place we grew up,
Sure.
if you like. So and trying to build a life there. So yeah, it was a sort of a fairly you know in terms of the start, a sort of a fairly great childhood, a big focus on family, as I said. I mean, a big part of my life was a small family business, um,
Mhm.
and that again on reflection now after many years, I'm realizing how much of an influence that was on some of the things that I've regarded important later on, and the things that I ended up doing.
That's incredible, and hats off to you. And I always have nothing but admiration and full respect for anyone that leaves a home overseas and culture that they know, friends that they had, to start again, and at such a formative age in our development, in your teen years, to make it over here. Hats off to you for doing that. And so coming over, university, then work. Tell us a bit about what you started doing, and give us a bit of a tour through your journey.
Yeah, so I mean, it all started. I came to the UK to study chemistry, so so science was a sort of a bit of a path that if at school you had good grades, and you people were steering you in that direction for whatever reason. And I remember I had a really good friend of mine who loved humanities, and we were really close. And so she said, "Okay, I'll try science, and you try humanities." And in the end,
Okay.
in the end, actually, we stuck to our own path. So she's now a musician, and I followed a different path, but we're still very, very close. And yeah, so it wasn't a sort of a conscious choice, but it ended up being the thing that got them started, if you like. And I suppose I recognize the sort of for me there was something about the importance of asking questions, and a lot of science is about asking questions and finding the underlying thread of things and the reason why things are there. So I think that kind of start has got me onto a path early on. That was, it was quite an interesting one, I think, at the beginning. It got me. I was still sort of, I suppose, quite young, and still feeling my way through. But yes, sort of science was my first calling, if you like.
I'm with you. And what I found fascinating is you do, as many do when I talk to them, is they kind of miss some bits out. And the bits that I think I missed out is that I don't think you stopped at your first degree. So asking questions and building on your knowledge seems to be a theme that comes throughout. So after you did your bachelor's, like, what else did you do, if you don't mind me asking, in terms of your academic pursuits?
Yeah, I mean, I think and again, it was a bit, I mean, as it is at that age, I mean, it was it's sort of feeling my way through, and yes, through that first sort of degree with science, and there was a sort of, in fact, it was combined with management studies. And I think through that, I started discovering the whole focus on people in the context of business. And for me, that ended up being the thing that was quite important. And again, as I said, looking back, probably was always important, because I saw how that how that impacted, as I said, a small family business. But I, that wasn't a realization that I had at the time.
No.
So yeah, through that, I then ended up doing a postgrad research degree which was very much focused then around people. So I went from chemistry, and I could have stayed and continued on the chemistry path. But in the end, I decided to go a different way at the time. So I was so this research degree was very much around it wasn't management, it was around industrial relations, and sort of how you, at the workplace, you have different interests, different dynamics, how do you reconcile those? And again, the importance of people very much front and center in how business functions. So I then sort of took a slightly different turn.
Okay, I'm with you. And the research degree, to call it what I understand to be, was a PhD.
It ended up, it culminated into a PhD.
So I actually should address you from here on forth as doctor.
Oh, please don't. I've never used it. The one time I used it actually for a booking, somebody thought I was a medical doctor, so I still use it. Not response to any emergencies. So.
Fair enough. And so it's a research degree, so science, industrial relations, and then there is a small question of an MBA that I think is lurking somewhere. Is that true, or did I imagine it from somewhere that you did also then do an MBA at some point?
Yeah, I did. I did it whilst when I started working. I did that part-time. I did that for I think at that point I became a lot clearer as to where I was going. So I was working in the field of human resource management already at the time. It was the time of a sort of a big change in the 90s, the sort of the mid to late 90s, she says. When the a different model of how you do HR came about, the business partnering model, talking about the importance of relationship management, but also the importance of how you organize an HR function. And for me, and I always felt that it was important to, I suppose, demonstrate that I'm not just a functional expert, that I understand how business works. I understand, where the value is, and I try to use the importance and the core essence of people to help the business grow in the direction they want to go into. So for me, the MBA was at the time it came after I was working initially for a few years. I did some contracting and in the private and public sector. So I started doing this at a time to sort of build up my credibility, I felt, as a business person, not just a functional expert.
Yeah. And you know what? It's so funny to talk about this now, because going back to 10, 11, maybe 12 years or so when we worked together in our respective seats, at the time, I didn't know your background, but you stood out as one of the rare kinds of HR business partners because of the commercial lens with which you took. So I remember being chief cheerleader, and I'd come to you about, this so-and-so wants to hire this role, or, you'd come to me and talk about there's this coming up. But I just remember at the time, you'd ask these really sort of insightful questions. At the time, I don't mind telling you now, it's like, oh, damn it, just let me go and do the thing that I'm here to do, which is make some noise about this wonderful opportunity. And it stuck with me, because it isn't commonly found where you've got a HR business partner who leads with the commercial lens. There is the technical functional lens, but for the commercial lens and the questions you ask, now I get it. Now, when you say you did the MBA, I was like, you see, if only I had known, my eyes would have been more open to sort of the background to the questions and your desire to really make sure that anything that was done was really in service of the growth of the organization that we were both serving at the time. So thank you for making that clear for me all these years later. Later on.
You were very patient and gracious, Kofi, and which is why I think we ended up working so well together. So, thanks for your patience with my question.
No, not at all. One of the things that I think has become more explicit in my thinking is sometimes you just don't know what you don't know, and I think that my ego has been ground down quite a lot insofar as I recognize the older I am, the less that I actually know. So I think a theme for me has always been curiosity rather than frustration, because with different viewpoints comes a broader picture. So it was always welcomed, and it kept me on my toes, because I knew if I'm coming to Melvina to talk about something, I need to have some background to it. I can't just come to you and say, we just want to hire some people in this area, because that wasn't just going to fly. There needed to be a business imperative behind it and a rationale that being thought through. So it was definitely welcome. So let's talk a bit about Metochi Consulting, which started last year. I think we'll be doing a huge disservice just to go from PhD, MBA, and leap to this. Could you therefore summarize the experience, the work experience that you had, and maybe any key takeaways from it that you had prior to starting? Because then people can get a sense of, it's not you woke up one day and then you started your own business after your studies, because it really isn't that. I know it, but just to share with other people what the career journey was before now.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. So I think it was the core thing. I think you described it was how do we, and what really sort of always got me going was being close to where the business was, and understanding that. So, I mean, I did start off as a researcher, so I did spend a bit of time as a researcher, and in fact, the research work that I started doing after the PhD, which I stayed with that for a bit longer. So the research work that I started doing at the time was about how can HRM practices impact corporate performance. That was a big theme in HRM research at the time. And so I think that's what led me to wanting to really understand whether, in fact, all the things that I learned about, that I researched, actually translated into real life impacts for businesses. So I made the decision to leave research for a bit and then go into the private sector. So I ended up doing some contracting work. I did some contracting work for both public sector and also did some work in the banking as a small banking organization for a period of time. And then sort of after the MBA, I moved into the corporate world. So that's where sort of the shift happened. So I think it was always that kind of, let's see, whether there's sort of, the things that I've learned about how HR can really have an impact actually does work. And I of course realized that, the world is not as, as you see and as you research, and it's a lot more complex than that. So I think over the last, after sort of going into the corporate world, I think I became a lot more aware of that complexity. And yes, I spend the best part of my professional life in a corporate environment, and clearly that had a real sort of impact in what I recognized as being very, important in terms of how we move things forward in a business. And how do you move businesses forward through people? Because that's where I was coming from. I was always coming from, your core is the people. There's not much else, at the end of the day, and that's where a lot of the potential is. So how do you move forward through people? So
that's super clear, and it is something that I feel at times certain organizations can move away from understanding and appreciating, because whatever you do, whether it's with a technology lens or it's retail focused or financial service, whatever you do, it's best done with the engagement of the population that has decided to work for the organization. For various reasons we go to work, but so often it is something you see where that view is almost forgotten, or it becomes secondary, or the company gets too big or detached from that essence. So that makes a lot of sense. And I suppose I love this idea of, for me, God draws straight lines with crooked sticks, and for others it might be the universe or Allah or Buddha or whatever. But throughout, as you've talked, I really see how from the very beginning, the questions that you've asked, and then the management side, and then building on that with the PhD, and then the MBA, and then the work experience, and then moving formally full-time into HR roles that allowed you to lean into the realities, because theory is one thing, as you said, into the realities. There's been that thread that's gone throughout it that I guess has become more and more and more vibrant, vivid, tangible to you. And so proud that you've taken the step to bring all of that together in Metochi Consulting. I know a bit about it, but tell me and us, like, what is Metochi Consulting here to do, so that people can get excited about the work that you're now creating, all of that experience that you're bringing to bear?
Yeah. So I guess it will be no surprise to people that I actually have a very strong belief that if you combine things in the right way in an organization, in a company, in a business, then you will achieve superior results. So I've often seen things being sort of counterintuitive or not mutually reinforcing in terms of practices in relation to people, but generally sort of in organizations. And I think that destroys potential, undermines the potential of people, but also undermines the potential that is there within the business that can really be brought to service. So I think so when I was sort of reflecting on some of the messaging that I wanted to put out there, from my research experiences, from my years in corporate life, from my own sort of the lessons that I had from being a sort of in this HR world for a long time, it was about making sure that I mean, it was three things for me. It was sort of maintaining the focus on people, the human-centered aspect, making sure that you always recognize the context. So context for me is really important. And I know people talk about strategic, but I think for me, strategic is about context. So, and the context is different across different organizations. And then the other one is sort of evidence-based, which is very much for me grounded in my sort of, I suppose, research and other sort of my approach over the years, which is always asking the questions and getting to the underlying problem we're trying to solve. So Metochi Consulting is about bringing those things together and creating those people strategies and solutions that will move a business forward at critical transitions. And why I focus on critical transitions is because I think that's where potential can be sort of either enhanced or really sort of undermined, at its worst, sort of destroyed.
Yeah.
So that's what Metochi Consulting is there to do.
That is fabulous. So I think having the three things, the people-centered approach, backing it up with context of the change or the transition, because the circumstances are different for every organization in terms of, I suppose, sophistication, maturity, how entrenched the leadership is in terms of being hands-on or hands-off, all sorts of things come into it. And then last but not least, using that research lens that you have had over the years to inform the decisions. I think it's a powerful combination, because if you really want to know something, you need to have some data to test your hypothesis, right? Like this is what I think may be happening, but actually with the data shows this is actually what's happening. So blending all of those things together to really help companies who, I think, let's face it, change is the one constant that we're all going to navigate, whether it be from an AI perspective or changing your trading partner because of some tariffs or what have you. This is all going to come to fore. And yeah, as a busy leader, if you take your eye off the ball in terms of how are the people that are in your business feeling about the changes, then you do, to your point, lose the potential that may be there, or destroy the trust that's been built over many years before. So wowzers, I love it. And I love that you found your calling. Starting your own thing cannot be an easy feat, or it can be. How have you found that transition from working in the corporate setting, with the familiarity that it brings in terms of, where you're supposed to be, what you're supposed to do. Sometimes it's reactive, sometimes it's proactive. You definitely know that you're going to get paid a salary every month to starting your consultancy. How have you found that change?
Yeah, it's tough, right? I mean, it's like you know yourself. I think it's for me, a lot of my identity was wrapped up in that. I recognized that a lot of who I was wrapped up in that corporate life. And so it just needed distance, and it needed a complete reset for me. The catalyst for that, ended up being, some personal situation that I needed to deal with, but ultimately it was about that distance from a great sort of, set of experiences that I had and over many years to something else. So I did go through a very gradual. It was all organic, as you said. I mean, it wasn't like I woke up one day and said, I'm doing this. And I think a lot of people, I take my hat to a lot of people who do that. They keep experimenting, they keep learning. And I think there's a lot of power in that. For me, it was a lot more organic. It happened sort of over a period of time. And it was about, I had to find, that I was sort of, it's like I was reconnecting, all of the different elements. I had to go back and find those elements and bring them back in, because as you say, I think corporate life, is great in many ways. And, for those of us who've been able to spend a lot of time there, I think we see the value. I mean, I couldn't be here and do what I do if I didn't have the benefit experience. But at the same time, it can be, you're perceived in a particular way. You do, certain things for that salary at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So I think sort of positioning yourself in a way, clarifying your message and what it is that you're putting out there. I think for me that was the sort of the thing that took me back and really forced me to think about the things that maybe I hadn't thought about for a long time. So it was a sort of a gradual process that happened at time.
That's incredible to hear, because like I say, some people watch this or other and think, oh yeah, I wake up and this is it. And what they won't know is that you spent decades in great corporate roles, learning sometimes what you do want, sometimes what you don't want. But then in your case, a period of, sounds like, introspection and reflection on, well, who am I now? And where do I want to go going forward, was able to sort of, it became percolating through, like the coffee that I should have been making, that I haven't, but percolating through and becoming more prominent in your consciousness to then guide you to where you are now is just what I've taken away from what you've explained. Does that sit with you as an accurate kind of interpretation?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it was about sort of, I think at the beginning, it's that, I think the belief that is possible is something that it doesn't necessarily, I mean, for me, that was sort of a question, is this possible? Can this happen? And I think the other things I would add is the sort of the power of sort of small steps, start doing whatever it is, pick something and start sort of, working on this new direction. And I think what I found is that, and also celebrate whatever the achievement might be at the back of that. And I found that a number of these sort of small steps then increase that belief that that's possible. And then, you go from there.
Yeah.
So I think for me that was really important. And also talking to people who have actually gone through even greater transitions than mine, that have really sort of, started something, because they've experienced something really sort of, really that had a really big impact in their lives, and they had to be really set where they were and what they wanted to do. So I think, talking to people, making those sort of connections, but also the power of small steps for me is really important.
Yeah, there's so much in there, and I could spend the rest of this conversation talking about it, because you've touched upon some things that are really dear to me, in so far as that compound effect. I mean, there's a book on it, but by being committed and consistent and showing up, but then celebrating when you do show up, you take these small steps that at the time you're like, well, this is not, but you keep doing it, and you bring in influences or perspectives from others, experts that have done it, been there, who can support you on that journey and make you feel that what you're trying to do isn't beyond the realms of possibility. It need not be limited by what you know, because actually there's so much that we don't know, that we've never done, and we're not to know. And so going into that space reminds me very much of one of my favorite quotes, which I must try and remember now. Start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. Was a quote that it's a famous black tennis player from, I think, 60s, Arthur Ashe, said. And for me, it's just go, just I think start off with why it's important to you, because then again, there's a books on this. When the mission and the goal and the purpose is clear to you, the how won't be and need not be, because you've got no previous experience, but you know what you want, you know why you want it, why it's important to you. And then as you go along that journey of self-discovery and exploration, better tools are found. And then you're like, oh, okay, I didn't know how to do this, now I know how to do this. Business plans, didn't know how to do that, now I do. Marketing, didn't know how to do that, now I do. But then you test and you learn, a bit like a scientist might, you sort of test and you learn, and then you fail and you fail fast, but then you keep reviewing and then going forward. So yeah, as I said, I would definitely spend all the conversation here, but there are other things to cover. Obstacles that you've overcome in that transition period, what are some of them that sort of come to mind, just to give people a sense of, if they're feeling similar, they're not by themselves, and I'm sure they won't be, but yeah, what obstacles are you sort of proud that you've overcome in that transition from salary, senior leader, corporate settings to individual, growing a consulting business on an entrepreneurial basis?
Yeah, gosh. So I think for me, I think that's security that you spoke about. I mean, obviously, you can rely on that. And then suddenly you can't. And of course, different people have different tolerance for that, right?
Yeah.
I suppose I'm at a stage of life where I felt, the questioning, the questioning was there, but I think that's a thing that you need to get used to, and I think that can be a difficult thing, especially at the beginning. I think, also the other thing, sometimes I mean, it can get lonely, I would say. I think, especially at the very beginning, you sort of, you had a structure and you had a support network where you were, but that's no longer available. So in a way, for me, it was about recreating that. How do you then recreate that in a way that's sort of supportive, but also, in a way, not losing those threads that got you to the place you are, but also, making sure that you're moving forward. So for me, it was about a period of time to sort of, really reconnect with people and support networks that would help me sort of get there, or get where I want to get to. Because I think if you are questioning all on your own, and you hear that voice in your head all the time, I think it can be counterproductive. So you just need to make sure that you put it out there. You and I had some of those conversations earlier.
Yes.
So, and I've always thanked you for that. So I think that for me, those kinds of things, the sort of the hit that you get of your identity and who you were, and then suddenly, as you rebuild that, there are things that you have to sort of overcome to remain convinced that this thing is possible and you can, you can have.
Yeah, it's so tough, but I think what you said there reminds me of something, we talked about previously, about being intentional about how you spend your time, who you spend your time with, what you spend your time doing. Because I found the same. You go from going to work and you've got your people at work that you've known over a period of time that you can go to lunch with, or just get a coffee with, or just go for beers, or whatever your thing is, you can network and connect with. And then you go to building something and it's you, and that's gone. And it can be, like you say, it can be a lonely place. But speaking to that intentionality, I'm grateful that however difficult or challenging it's been, we've always managed to find some time, whether it be once a year or more, just to have those kind of conversations that, for me, I've always been like, oh yeah, or maybe, because it just makes me think about things from someone who knows me, and also cares for my well-being, and vice versa, who wants you to win. And sometimes that's needed just to cut through. I call it Killer Kofi in my head. He's Sergeant Killjoy. He'll be like, oh no, yeah, but you can't do that. Oh no, but that will never work. And I'm like, oh, some days I win. Some days I need other people to help me win against that voice, really. So yeah, I hope that that replicates or resonates with what you're sort of saying.
Yeah, and I think what you said there about this experimental mindset, in a way, some days you win, some days you won't. I think you don't. I think that kind of is a contrast for me with sometimes how we as in the collective, if we sort of our experiences have been in a professional setting, that you mistakenly, I think, think that you have control over what happens, but in fact, life is not about control. And for me, sort of letting go is another, and I don't want to go too deep here, but I mean, letting go is another thing that I would say sometimes. It's, you sometimes you just have to let things go. Things might not go your way. It might not happen this time, just let go and move on. And I think that's, this, what you sort of alluded to, which is about experimenting, doing things, getting the feedback, and then, iterating and moving forward. I think that is can be a really sort of helpful thing in this process.
That is really helpful. It is really helpful to remember that. And I don't know if this resonates with you again, but I no longer attach success to an outcome, but more the process. So I see my role now very much as a farmer, sprinkling seeds in an intentional way, with no control over what will grow and what won't grow, but finding ways to enjoy the process of sprinkling seeds, and connecting with people and doing things that feel right to me on my own terms. Because I think from a corporate perspective, you've got your objectives and you've got targets and you've got these goals, and you could have your year-end review and did you do X, Y, and Z? Yes, I did. This is your bonus, especially in tech, this is your bonus. You're like, yes, I've achieved. There's so much more that goes into those things, but at least you've got something. When you start your own thing, and I'm hoping you can relate to this. Well, it's you and your idea, right? Like, what does success look like? Where are the KPIs that you and I are used to working towards? The the what, the how, and the why you've done things. It's not there anymore. So yeah, I think I take away from that, it calls for you to self-regulate, but also be back to you, like celebrate the journey itself, like the wins that come, but refocus, because the wins might not be the success you think. It's not going to be, oh, here's my new baby, everyone's going to love it instantly. I've discovered that is not the case. It's so, yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that. That's really, really, really helpful. So talking a bit more about the work that you do. So when you work with your clients, what are some of the issues that you tend to come across that you're helping them to solve or to navigate, really?
So again, because it happened sort of quite sort of organically, and I found myself working along with founder-led businesses and also sort of smaller businesses looking to scale. So a lot of what's in there, I think, is about those kinds of key moments where that business needs to go to the next level. And I think there are some statistics out there about the level of success of smaller businesses being able to navigate those transitions. So some of the key sort of areas that I've seen some of the impacts were around things like the significant growth, taking that step to achieve a sort of to take your company to the next level. Or if you're a founder-led business that to sort of has come to a point where the founder is looking to either scale back or exit, what happens then if you to be able to build that structure within the business that will sustain it going forward? There's a lot of what happens in especially, and there's a lot of in the UK in particular, there's a lot of established businesses, smaller businesses. They're a very significant part of the economy, but they're established by a founder, and years later the founder is still a very dominant figure. But sometimes to be able to sort of get to that next level, you need to founder needs to create that environment for the next level of growth. I've also sort of looked at some of the dynamics around sort of family businesses and succession. So that can be quite an important point. especially when things are moving to the next generation.
Mm.
Because the values of the founders are not necessarily in alignment with the values of the next generation. So there's a lot of that can happen in those moments. So exploring how that impact to get the business to smoothly transfer to the next generation has been really interesting, and it's something that I have personal sort of view about as well. So I think for me it's very close to what I think is important. So some of those, and that's where some of those the focus on transitions comes, because I think there's always a significant people implications there in the examples I mentioned. So if you are looking to scale significantly, there is a sort of a question about to get you to that next level, you need something different. You need to develop the skills and capabilities to get you to a very different place than where you started, perhaps. So there's always significant people implications that need to be considered ahead of time. So what I've been talking quite a bit about is more intentional. I think the word is really, really important to me, intentional and proactive people planning. It's not always a priority, but I think it can save a lot of time, and it can really help to navigate those problematic moments for a lot of not just smaller businesses. It just so happens that I've seen that quite a bit, and it resonated a lot with some of the work that I've done recently on that smaller businesses. But I think it's also important in larger organizations as well. Being very intentional and recognizing those key drivers that will get you to that next level, whether it's about skills, whether it's about culture, whether it's about you as a founder doing some work, to sort of develop your business in a slightly different way.
Yeah, what I see is often, I think we are generally creatures of habit, as a species, and change is not something that most people run towards. If you say there's going to be a change, especially if you're comfortable, it's like, why fix it if it's not broken? Is the old adage. But I think there is something in the work that you do to prepare leaders to support their teams with that change. So this is where we want to go. So communication for me is a massive one, and creating that vision, but also helping people get comfortable with that transition, because there's one thing to know of the change and there's another thing to be comfortable with it. And sometimes if you've done something for so many years, it's not necessarily about the skills and the capabilities of what it is that you do, but it's also the desire of the individuals within that organization to go to the next place, and they may be happy where they are. So unless you have that conversation where you could take some soundings from the people in the business and really assess who wants to stay on the bus and who might not want to, then I can imagine there's conflicts pop up all over the place when someone wants to change ownership or they want to scale and become 5x what they were. Because if you're there minding your own business, doing a decent job, earning some decent money, do you want the stress that change brings? I don't know that we often do, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think I completely agree with you. I think sometimes what gets lost is the purpose of that change. I think, and yes, communication is key, but I think people recognize when things are sort of when there is a real sort of driver underneath what's happening, and they will respond accordingly. So I think you never should. I would say never take for granted anything, because and people do sort of recognize more than perhaps people might think. They do recognize what's happening, and they do have a reaction to it. So I think the longer you leave things under sort of a level of uncertainty, the less likely you are to be able to succeed in that transition. So for me, the proactive and intentional side of people planning, or the impacts on people, considering that as early as possible, will help you to then be very, very intentional about how you then manage that through that process, because it has a fallout at every different stage, and you have to have that clarity of sort of vision, but also the purpose and the driver behind it. And it may be that people can't influence it, which is fair enough. I mean, it's not always possible. There's other external factors that drive that. But as long as you've articulated that in the right way, then I think you're more likely to be able to have a positive impact rather than a negative one. Because ultimately, you have to manage that. You might have to manage whatever.
You do. It's so key. So key. So thank you for sharing that. And one thing I wasn't clear on, because where we start doesn't have to be where we end up. In terms of the clients sectors that you work with, what sectors do you enjoy working with? Not to say what sectors do you work with, because I guess it could be any, but just so anyone listening who's thinking, some of these things resonate. I might need someone like Melvina to help us navigate this next period. What sectors would you generally work with or like to work with?
Look, you know that my bread and butter is financial services, but I have sort of done this now recently, working with people across sort of, from a digital sort of agency to a sort of a consultancy to a business within the retail sector. So I'm not, I think as long as for me is, that transition, I do in that place where I can add value and help. But definitely there are sort of sectors like financial services that I know very well and have sort of worked with over many years. I think for me the key is that stage and being able to sort of recognize that value that I may be able to bring. But it's not, I'm not the way that I'm positioning the business is not sector specific. And as I said, I've done quite a bit of work recently with smaller businesses.
I mean, what you do is about people fundamentally, and that translates across whatever business you're in. So I see it as the world is your oyster. I can't wait. I just cannot wait to just watch it go from strength to strength as it already is. So one of the questions that I had for you, and I'm mindful that we will probably need to start landing our airplane soonish for future appointments, but without a doubt, you've seen different types of leadership and different types of leader. And I just wondered, and I know this is not prepared or rehearsed, so just from the top of your head, what some of the key attributes of perhaps some of the most impactful leaders that you've seen over the years, be it corporate or entrepreneurial settings for you, like what are some of those key attributes that have really stuck out for you?
I mean, I think there's different characteristics, I think, that are always there. So I would say definitely from my own sort of even personal experience of bosses that I have, I would say people who allow you to do the thing that you do. So allow you the space to be who you are in an impactful way. So nobody is responding. I don't think most people would respond very well if their sort of environment is controlled in a way that they can't be themselves. And when I say be themselves, I mean bring the complexity that is who we are. So I think for me, sometimes the complexity of who we are and what we can bring in to the environments we're working can get lost. So I think the leaders that I have seen that have the most positive impact are those leaders that really allow people to be who they are without judgment. Of course, in support of the business objectives. Clearly, there is always in business a commercial driver, but you tend to win more, I found, if you create that environment where people can be all of the different things that they are innate in the business. Because there's things that you may not know.
Yeah,
that will come out.
amazing. Yeah. Anything else come to mind?
I think the other thing is there's a lot that is said over the years about we've given it different names, I suppose. We've called it authentic leadership, we've called it servant leadership, we've called it a number of different things, but I think genuinely because people really can understand when leaders care. So if you care, people will know. And when I say care, not necessarily me, care about people's personal situations, or care as in care about the person, care about what the person brings. So this kind of caring, thoughtful leadership that is sort of able to bring people in a, create that, that open and safe space for people to be who they are, because people will respond a lot more to people who they can see care more than the KPIs and the sort of the objectives for this quarter.
Fantastic, and so helpful, because it makes sense, right? Like if you are in a relationship where both parties are equally excited about being in it and care for each other, then you can bring your best to it. But then talking about the authenticity piece as well, and we are so complicated. I look at myself, but also the people that I work with, colleagues, we're like onions. I think a real example is you and I. In our previous iterations of how we worked together, I think it was before the time of, or maybe growth in ourselves, where all aspects of who we were really discussed. We had a job, we came and we did the job, and then I think what I'm grateful for is having the time and the years to know you, where new layers have come out, and I'm like, and I think if anything, as I see it, our friendship and relationship has grown over time for the richness and the complexity that we bring. So I think it's a very well made point that we're here because of that. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah. So one last question, if I might, and I know you've probably got to get to your next thing. It's there's been so many things along the journey that you've shared and where you are now. If you could go back in time and you could speak to your younger self, and at any age, at any time, knowing what you know now, I guess, what might you say to that person about what is to come and how they may navigate the journey of life?
I mean, one thing I on the reflection that I've had, I think one thing I would say is say yes more. I think slightly because of maybe it's also generational, but I think it was a very linear path. I saw myself in a very linear way from when I started, and I think as a result of that, I think the choices I made were all in that light. So I would say, to that younger self, just say yes more, just go with where the opportunities might arise, because life is not linear. And it will never, as they say, life happens when you're making other plans. So I think, I would say, adopt that sort of more experimental mind said earlier, and recognize that life cannot control it. Just go with it.
Yeah, that's a juicy one, and what a wonderful way to end. In terms of a reminder for all of us, really, just to go with the flow. And I think we've said it a few times, but being intentional about the things, the places, the people that you surround yourself with, what you want from life, all helps navigate you on that flow. Because I guess then you've got, to your experience, the data which says, I like this sort of thing, or I like to hang with these kind of people, or I like doing this type of activity, as a framework to make those calls. And then sometimes just say yes, just to explore and see, because you just don't know what you may find as a new interest or a passion for you. So thank you so much, Melvina, for sharing that. I'm going to reflect on that more myself and just see where else I can find some mischief to get myself into. So Melvina sent me. Melvina sent me. Great. So yeah. Anything for you before we part? Any last things that you wanted to share that we haven't covered at all?
It was lovely to talk to you as always, and yeah, hopefully see you soon.
Yes, definitely. We'll fingers crossed. We will definitely make it happen very soon. But yeah, have a great day and good luck with everything. And I cannot wait. Metochi Consulting to the moon. I cannot wait.
Thank you, Kofi.
All right, all the best.